Before we begin, take a moment to like the video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and when. It helps more than you think, and makes sure stories like this keep finding you. Now, let's begin. My name is Marissa Hale. I am 32 years old, a registered nurse, and I have worked the night shift in the emergency department at St. Anselm Regional Medical Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, for nearly 7 years. People think you get used to it, the chaos, the screaming, the smell of blood, and the quiet way death waits in line like everyone else. But you do not. No one does. That Saturday, February 1st, began like any other. Freezing rain tapped against my windshield as I scraped off a thin layer of ice. The city looked half-dead fog clinging to the streetlights. Cars crawling across black slush, and a sky so heavy with gray, it felt like the whole world had stopped breathing. My shift started at 7 p.m., but I arrived at 6:40 p.m. I always gave myself 20 extra minutes to grab bad coffee, clear my head, and check in with whoever was coming off the day shift. I pulled into the back lot, swiped my badge at the staff entrance, and stepped into a different kind of cold fluorescent, humming, full of old metal and antiseptic. Perry, the night security guard, barely looked up from his crossword puzzle as I passed the front desk. The halls were already busy. A patient screamed from triage. A nurse cursed under her breath, and a gurney rolled past with an empty IV stand clattering behind it. In the locker room, I slipped into my navy blue scrubs and tied my hair into a tight bun. I checked my pockets. Trauma scissors, notepad, fresh pen. Same ritual every night, same dread settling in my gut. I passed the break room. Margot, one of the techs, was half asleep with a bag of pretzels in her lap and her shoes kicked off under the table. She opened one eye as I walked past, then closed it again. The trauma bay smelled like burnt plastic and lemon disinfectant. I found Dr. Ellis at the head of the nurses' station, staring at the board. He was in his mid-40s, salt and pepper beard, sharp eyes, and a voice that could cut glass. Brilliant but impatient. The kind of physician you either respected immediately or hated forever. Raymond, my usual partner, was checking the crash cart for missing supplies. He looked up and gave me a nod. "Full house tonight," he said. "Overdose in Bay 1, car wreck in Bay 2, psychiatric hold in 6. They're prepping Bay 4 now." I stopped short. Bay 4. I thought that room was closed. It was. Light panel blew last week, but facilities signed off a couple of hours ago. Someone from admin wants it open. I frowned. Bay 4 had been roped off since Tuesday. One of the ceiling fixtures had sparked and nearly caught fire. Nobody wanted to touch it until the electricians came through. But sometimes, when the emergency department overflowed, rules got blurred. By 8 p.m., the department was packed. The sound of sirens barely stopped. Stretchers lined the hall. We were already doubling patients in rooms meant for one. I helped Raymond stabilize a man in methamphetamine withdrawal, then assisted Dr. Ellis with a crash intubation in Bay 2. One of the residents reattached part of a man's thumb while vomiting quietly into her mask between sutures. At 9:15 p.m., a resident came sprinting around the corner, breathless. Incoming trauma. Male. Late 20s. Multiple gunshot wounds. No ID. They are bringing him in now 2 minutes out. Dr. Ellis ran a hand down his face. Put him in Bay 4. Closest room. I opened my mouth, then shut it again. Bay 4. Fine. I pulled on fresh gloves and pushed through the double doors into the room. It was ready. The lights overhead buzzed faintly but stayed steady. Monitors were powered. Suction worked. No sparks. No flickering. It smelled faintly of scorched wires and citrus, but otherwise it looked like any other trauma bay. I laid out sterile gauze, charged the defibrillator, unwrapped a trauma pack, and waited. At 9:20 p.m., the emergency medical technicians burst through the doors with the patient. He was young. Blood soaked his torn shirt. His chest looked like someone had fired into it point blank. His face was swollen, one eye completely shut. His arms dangled off the stretcher, pale and limp. No ID. One of the technicians called out. Unresponsive. Weak pulse. Barely holding on. We moved fast. Dr. Ellis took the lead. I cleared his airway. Raymond cut away what was left of his clothes. His chest barely rose between compressions. Blood pooled beneath the gurney. We administered 2 rounds of epinephrine, loaded 4 units of O negative, and shocked him once. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. At 9:37 p.m., Dr. Ellis stepped back and said quietly, "Time of death, 9:37 p.m. The room went still. We all stood there for a second, bloody, breathless, tired. The resident marked the chart. Raymond placed the toe tag. Unidentified male. One of the orderlies would come for the body later. We were out of space, out of time, and more ambulances were already on their way. As I peeled off my gloves and stepped toward the sink, I looked back once. He was still there, covered with a sheet now, but I could see the shape of his face beneath it. The broken nose, the swelling around the mouth. His eyes were closed, his lips slightly parted, and yet I swear on everything the second I turned away, I felt him looking at me, and from somewhere behind me, soft and low and impossible, I heard my name, Marissa. I did not tell anyone what I heard. Not at first. There is a rule in hospitals, especially in emergency rooms, unspoken but absolute. Do not become the story. You do not say you saw something strange. You do not admit that the dead man whispered your name. You take a breath, reset the room, and keep moving. So I did. For the next hour, I bounced between cases: a seizure in room 5, an infant with a high fever in triage, a diabetic crash in bay 3. I focused on the work. I spoke calmly. I charted quickly. I smiled at families I would never see again. But every time I passed bay 4, I slowed. The curtain was half drawn. The lights were still on. The air inside looked still, like a photograph frozen in time. The body lay there, untouched. No one had come to claim him. No ID, no wallet, no phone, just blood, blank paperwork, and silence. At 10:42 p.m., I walked into Bay 4 alone, just to tidy up. That is what I told myself. The blood had dried in the corners of the gurney. The EKG machine still blinked faintly, waiting for input. I pulled on gloves, reached for the bleach wipes, and paused at the edge of the sheet. His body had not moved. His arms were still crossed over his chest, a gauze pad tucked under one wrist where the IV line had been. The toe tag had shifted slightly. I reached to adjust it. That was when I noticed something strange. The tag read, "Unidentified male ESD. Age, 25-35. Time of death, 9:37 p.m. Date, February 1st, 2025. Cause, multiple gunshot wounds torso, neck, upper left arm. Note, pending talks, screen no identifiers. But under admission status, someone had typed, returned, I blinked. Returned. I leaned in. The letters were perfectly typed. No smudges. No stray ink. Same font as the rest of the form. Not handwritten. Not edited in. As if the system itself had processed that word. I looked at the monitor. The man's heart had flatlined an hour ago. We had called it, pronounced it, tagged it. And yet, I felt it again, that cold shift in the air. A pressure behind my ears, like a vacuum forming around the room. A smell, sharp and metallic, like burnt coins. I took a step back. The lights above flickered once, twice, then steadied. I looked down. The man's eyes were still closed, but his lips had changed. When we left him, his mouth had been slightly open, slack-jawed, like all corpses tend to be. Now it was closed, fully, firmly. The jaw was set, the corners of his mouth turned just slightly downward, like someone concentrating or holding something back. I wanted to leave. I should have left, but I had one last task. Unplug the monitor. Routine, harmless. I reached for the machine, and the man's left hand twitched, just a little, just once. But I saw it. My heart stuttered. I froze, eyes locked on that pale, veined hand. Fingers curled slightly inward like they were resting, or remembering how to move. A muscle flexed just beneath the skin. No, that is not possible. I stepped closer and placed 2 fingers on his neck. No pulse. I leaned in. No breath. No chest movement. No signs of life. Just cold, clammy skin, and that damn toe tag returned. Behind me. The monitor beeped once, then again. Beep, beep, beep. I turned, hands shaking. The EKG screen lit up tiny green pulses bouncing along the black display. A perfect sinus rhythm. Heart rate, 82. I stared at the screen, then back at the body. Still dead, still motionless. I unplugged the machine, yanked the cord from the wall, and backed out of the room without cleaning a thing. In the hallway, Raymond caught my eye. "You good?" I nodded. "Fine." But I was not, because I know what I saw. And the next time I passed Bay 4 at 11:15 p.m., the sheet covering his face had slipped, and his mouth was open again. At 11:47 p.m., I did something I should not have done. I went back into Bay 4. There was no clinical reason, no page, no task. I told myself I was checking the power panel the EKG machine had glitched earlier. After all, I told myself it was about procedure, but it was not. It was about him, the body, the man who should not have moved, should not have registered a pulse, should not have whispered my name. The room was quiet when I stepped inside. I closed the door behind me. The sheet covered his face again. Someone must have come through, maybe environmental services, and straightened things. But no one had logged a cleaning. I checked the roster later. No one claimed to enter Bay 4 between 10:45 p.m. and 12:02 a.m. Still, the curtain was drawn. The monitors were dark. The smell had shifted less like blood, more like iron filings and old coins. I stood there for almost a full minute before I moved closer. The lights overhead buzzed. I stepped to the side of the bed and reached for the clipboard. Nothing new. Still no ID. Still no fingerprints in the system. Still no family call. Toxicology pending. I was about to leave when I heard it. A whisper. From beneath the sheet. "You were there too." I froze. I was not breathing. My legs locked in place. Every inch of my body screamed to run, but I did not. I reached out, hand trembling, and pulled the sheet back just far enough to uncover his face. His eyes were open, wide, alert, pupils fixed directly on me. I dropped the clipboard. He did not blink, did not speak again, just stared like he knew me, like he recognized something in me that I had not admitted even to myself. Then slowly his lips moved. No breath, no sound, but I read the words, "You were there. You saw it. You left me." "No," I whispered. "That is not possible." He smiled, only a little, just the corners of his mouth twitching, but it was enough. I stumbled backward, hit the wall, knocked over the mobile tray. Instruments clattered to the floor. The monitor, which was unplugged, suddenly flashed back on. 82 BPM. Sinus rhythm. And then it spoke. The machine. The voice came through its speakers artificial. Robotic, but unmistakable. Time of death denied. I turned and ran, out of Bay 4, through the hallway, past the nurse's station. I did not stop until I hit the stairwell and slammed the door behind me. Down 2 flights, into the sublevel, the old break room where no one goes anymore. Only then did I let myself breathe. I was shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor. My scrubs were damp with sweat. My hands would not stop trembling. I stayed down there for 16 minutes. No one paged me. No one noticed I was gone. When I came back up at 12:33 a.m., the door to Bay 4 was wide open. The room was empty. No sheet. No body. Just the tag, lying on the bed, and 3 words printed across the back in red ink. Tell the truth, I did not sleep after my shift ended. I did not even leave. My car sat untouched in the employee lot while I wandered the hospital in silence, pretending I had rounds to finish. I went to the cafeteria, poured black coffee, let it go cold in my hands. No one noticed. That is the gift of a night nurse. You live in the corners of the system, present, but peripheral. At 5:21 a.m., I found myself back in the medical records department, standing in front of a terminal no one was using. I had access, not full privileges, but enough to view archived charts, especially for emergency room admissions. I typed in the patient code printed on the toe tag, TRM 040225 UNID. Nothing came up. No file. No timestamp. No trauma log. I tried searching by time of death, 9:37 p.m., February 1st, 2025. That returned one result, but the file was wrong. The header said, "Unidentified male, age est, 25 to 35, admit, February 1st, 2020, 8:59 p.m., death, 9:37 p.m." But the rest of the chart was garbled, strange characters, partial lines, empty fields. The screen glitched when I scrolled. The allergy section was filled with the letter M repeated dozens of times. I clicked View Printed Record. The system paused. Then the printer beside me started to churn. It printed 1 page, single-sided, and when I picked it up, my stomach flipped. The top half was normal. Vitals, trauma codes, resuscitation efforts, the signature of Dr. Ellis. But the bottom third of the page had been burned. Not electronically, physically. Charred edges. The paper curled and bubbled inward, like someone had tried to set it on fire, or like it had come out of the printer already burned. I turned it over. The back was blank, except for a faint imprint, barely visible beneath the smoke stains. A single line, handwritten, in red ink. She saw it. She said nothing. My mouth went dry. I checked the digital log again. It showed the record had been printed only once right now. By me. No previous entries. No edits. Nothing. I brought the page to the charge nurse, Cassandra, and asked if she had seen anything like this before. She took one look and handed it back. "Get some rest, Marissa," she said. "You look fried. I'm serious. So am I." She turned and walked away. At 6:12 a.m., I stood in the stairwell again, the same place I had hidden hours earlier, and stared down at the chart in my hands. That burned edge. That sentence. That handwriting. I had seen it before. Not recently. Not even in this hospital. 2 years ago. At a different facility. Our Lady of Mercy. General, where I worked a brief 6-month contract before transferring to St. Anselm. There had been a case, a death that happened during my shift. Young male, late 20s. No ID. Sudden seizure. He coded in the hallway outside radiology. We called it at 9:37 p.m. Same time. Same profile. And after his body was transferred, someone had slipped a note into the chart. Same ink. Same words. She saw it. She said nothing. I remembered tearing it up, throwing it in the biohazard bin. I never told anyone. And now, 2 years later, it was back. New patient. Same death. Same time. Same message. And for the first time, I felt something worse than fear. Recognition. At 9:24 a.m., I stood in the supply closet with the lights off and tried to slow my breathing. I had just completed a double shift. 24 hours. Back to back. With no sleep. I should have been home. In bed, letting it all blur into the usual haze of exhaustion. But I could not. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The unidentified male. And I was beginning to wonder if I had ever really stopped seeing it at all. By 11 a.m., I was still in the building. I lingered near radiology, then cardiology. Took the long way to the vending machines. Every hallway felt slightly off-kilter, too quiet in places, too loud in others. Nurses avoided my gaze. The fluorescents flickered more often than usual. And when I passed Bay 4, the door was shut. Locked. No one was inside. At least, that was what I kept telling myself. At 11:27 a.m., I overheard Margot speaking to one of the interns. Her voice was low, distracted. He keeps looking over my shoulder, like he is waiting for something. I paused behind the medication cabinet. The intern asked, "Who?" Margot laughed nervously. "I do not know. Some guy. Quiet. I thought he was with security or maybe from psych. But every time I turn around, he is not there. Was he in a patient room? No. Just the hallway. By 4. She did not know. She had never seen his face, and yet she had seen him. At 12:42 p.m., I received a call from the intensive care unit. One of the elderly patients, Mr. Lamberti, 93 years old. End-stage congestive heart failure, had been asking for the woman from downstairs. "I think he means you," the nurse said. "He says he knows your name." I made my way up, confused. I had never treated him. I had never even been to that wing this week. When I entered the room, the air felt thin. Mr. Lamberti lay still, eyes wide. Oxygen cannula hissing faintly beside his cheeks. His voice was barely audible. "You should not be here," he said. I stepped closer. "You asked for me. You brought him," he whispered. "You brought the man, the one with no name." I froze. His eyes shifted toward the far corner of the room, the place just behind me, where shadows pooled near the window. He stands there, always stands there. Every time you do. I turn. Nothing. Just a rolling tray and a half-drawn blind. But my skin crawled. Mr. Lamberti reached for my wrist. He will follow you. Until you remember. Remember what? But he was already fading, eyes fluttering. Breath shallower than before. The monitor beeped slower. A nurse stepped in and asked me to leave. At 1:15 p.m., I sat alone in the chapel on the 3rd floor. The stained glass cast fractured colors across the pews. I watched the dust hang motionless in the air and tried to steady my hands. I was not crazy. Not yet. But something was wrong. Not just with me, with the hospital. With this man. With that room. I pulled out the burned chart and read the line on the back again. She saw it. She said nothing. My fingers traced the edge of the paper. I could still feel the heat in it. I was about to stand when I noticed the chaplain sitting in the back row, watching me. A man in his 60s, kind face, clean suit, hands folded neatly. I had never seen him before. Rough night? He asked. I nodded. Bay 4, he said. My throat tightened. You know about it. He smiled faintly. No one talks about it, but everyone feels it. That room always takes something. I stared at him. What do you mean? He shrugged, then stood and walked out without another word. At 2:31 p.m., I walked back down to the emergency department. Bay 4 was open again. Lights on. Monitors active. No chart on the bed. No name. But I could feel it as if someone had just stepped out seconds before I arrived. And when I leaned into the doorway, I swore the monitor blinked on by itself for just 1 second and displayed a message admitting Marissa Hale. At 5:48 p.m., I finally did the one thing I swore I would never do. I pulled the security footage. Not officially. That would have required paperwork. Sign-offs. A reason someone could log. Instead, I waited until Felix, the night tech in operations and surveillance, stepped out for dinner. He always left around 5:30 p.m. and stayed gone for at least 20 minutes. I knew his routine. We had shared 3 Christmas shifts together. The security room smelled like instant noodles and soldering dust. The monitors were arranged in a crescent, each one showing a different angle of the hospital lobby. Elevators, hallways, and trauma bays. I clicked back through the log. Bay 4, February 1st, between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. The time block was there. I clicked play. At 9:19 p.m., the trauma team rushed in. I watched myself enter first, ponytail swinging, gloves already on. Behind me, Raymond, Dr. Ellis, and 2 emergency medical technicians pushing the gurney. Except the gurney was empty. My blood went cold. In the video, I moved like I always did, fast. Focus. Professional. I reached down, clearly tending to something. I barked instructions. Dr. Ellis hovered beside me. Raymond passed me gauze. But the stretcher was empty. The bed was flat, the surface bare. There was no patient. I scrubbed forward. At 9:37 p.m., we stopped. The flat line appeared on the monitor. I stepped back. Dr. Ellis called time of death. I could read it on his lips, clear as day. Time of death, 9:37 p.m. We all turned away. No one removed the body, because according to the footage, there was no body, just an empty gurney, with red stains that vanished between frames. I stared at the screen. Sweat rolled down my neck. My hands shook. I rewound. Played it again. Same result. The entire code was recorded, but the patient, missing. Not blurred, not obstructed, not glitched, not there. At 6:12 p.m., I copied the file to a blank flash drive I had taken from Felix's drawer. Then I erased the log entry that showed I had accessed the footage. When Felix returned 5 minutes later, I was already in the stairwell, breathing through my teeth, feeling the sweat soak through my scrubs. I pulled out the flash drive and stared at it like it might bite. At 6:33 p.m., I found Raymond outside the hospital, near the ambulance bay. He was smoking, leaning against the back wall, watching the snow begin to fall. "Do you remember the gunshot patient from last night?" I asked. He nodded. "Bay 4. "Yeah. Why? What do you remember about him?" Raymond squinted. "Not much. Lots of blood. Young guy. Maybe Hispanic. Or Middle Eastern." I frowned. "You saw his face?" Raymond shrugged. "I think so. Why?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printout of a still frame from the security footage. I pointed at the stretcher. "Do you see anyone on that gurney?" He stared for a moment. "No," he said. "That cannot be right. It is the real footage." Raymond looked again, harder, and then his expression changed from confusion to something harder, more defensive. Maybe it glitched. "Raymond, you said you saw his face." "I thought I did. It was a long night." "No, it was not." "You should get some sleep," he said, already walking away. "You are starting to sound like one of the psych patients." At 7 p.m., I sat in my car in the far corner of the parking lot. I did not start the engine. I just stared out at the building, the lights glowing through layers of snow, windows blinking like tired eyes. In my hand, I held the flash drive. I could destroy it. I could erase all of this. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what he said. "You were there. You saw it. You left me." At 3:21 a.m., I broke protocol. I accessed an old case file from Our Lady of Mercy General Hospital, the facility I had worked at briefly 2 years ago. That hospital is in Dayton, Ohio, 70 miles north, but their record system still used the same login architecture. My St. Anselm credentials got me in. I did not know what I was looking for, but my fingers did. I typed in the year, 2023. I typed in the date, October 12th. I typed in the room, 214, and the screen blinked. Patient record, Jacob Riley, male, 29 years old. Admission time, 8:20 p.m. Code blue, 9:37 p.m. Attending nurse, Marissa Hale. My name, right there. Buried in a file I had done everything to forget. Jacob Riley. That was his name. I remembered the way it happened now, sharp and full and all at once, like a needle slipped under the nail. He had been brought in for seizures, no prior history. Fit, lean, twitchy around the eye. He kept asking for his sister. Though no one had reported any next of kin, I was working a double that night, running low on sleep and patience. I administered phenytoin for the seizures, standard dosage, or so I thought. 10 minutes later, his throat began to close. Anaphylaxis. No EpiPen ready. Crash cart delayed. 9:37 p.m. Time of death. Later, I learned he had a rare allergy to the stabilizer compound in the drug. It had been marked flagged in red, but I had clicked too fast. Dismissed the warning. Moved on. The physician on call, Dr. Lang, signed off on the error and shielded me from formal investigation. Said the system failed us both. Told me not to think about it. And I did not. I transferred to St. Anselm 2 weeks later and never said a word. Until now. At 4:04 a.m., I printed the full chart. It came out clean. No glitches. No burning. But when I flipped to the final summary page, something new had been added, handwritten in red ink. You knew. At 4:37 a.m., I returned to the emergency department. The halls were quiet. Even the trauma bays seemed to hold their breath. Bay 4 was closed again. Dark. No patient logged. But when I stood outside the door, the hallway lights behind me dimmed. The EKG monitor inside lit up. No pattern. No heartbeat. Just one word pulsing on the black screen in block white text. Remember. I stared at it. Numb. And then, for the first time in my life, I said it out loud. I killed him. At 5:10 a.m., I stood at the nurse's station with the old file in my hand. Dr. Ellis passed behind me. He glanced down at the paper. Jacob Riley, he said. That name sounds familiar. I turned to him. You never met him? He paused. No, he said slowly. I'm pretty sure I did. Then he frowned, shook his head, and walked away like the name had never touched him at all. At 5:52 a.m., I received a page from facilities. Unscheduled activity reported in Bay 4. Motion sensor active. No assigned personnel log. Please confirm. I stared at the message. Motion in a room that should be dark. Unused. Empty. But I knew. It had been waiting for me. At 6:08 a.m., I keyed in the override and opened the door. Bay 4 looked normal, monitors idle. Equipment stored. Everything in its place. Except the EKG machine. It was running. Not hooked to anything. No leads. No patient. But the line on the screen pulsed. Steady. Clean. Like it was tracking something just under the surface. I stepped closer. The room smelled different now, no longer metallic. No longer like antiseptic or dead. It smelled like earth. Wet stone. Graves. The screen flickered, and then a message appeared. One word at a time. Patient. Marissa Hale. Status. Admit pending. Condition. Non-viable. Order. Code entry required. Below that, a blinking prompt. Enter blood code. My hands trembled. I typed in my badge number. Nothing. I tried my date of birth. Nothing. The prompt blinked again, louder now. The machine began to beep in sync with my heart. Enter blood code. Enter blood code. Enter blood code. And then a final instruction appeared. What was his... My eyes burned. I knew what it was asking. I remembered the autopsy file. Jacob Riley's blood type. B negative. Rare. Mismatched to the emergency transfusion I had given him. That mistake alone could have killed him. And maybe it did. I typed it. B negative. The screen paused, then flashed green. Code accepted. Admission complete. The room shifted. Not physically, but atmospherically. The lights dimmed. The color of the walls drained to gray. I felt weight in my chest, pressure in my head. The monitors around me, all of them lit up. Even the ones that had not been powered in weeks. Vital signs appeared. Rapidly. All reading the same name. Patient. Jacob Riley. Time of death. 9:37 p.m. Cause. Systemic failure. Witness. Marissa Hale. Then the EKG shifted again. Transfer in progress. I took a step back. No, I whispered. What does that mean? The monitor beeped faster. Lights began blinking red. One word pulsed across every screen. In perfect unison. Replacement. At 6:19 a.m., I collapsed. Everything inside me locked up, heart pounding, ears ringing, limbs numb. And from the center of the room, I heard his voice one final time, clear, confident. "Your shift is over." Then, a silence. At 6:30 a.m., they found me. Raymond, Margot, Dr. Ellis. I was lying on the floor of Bay 4, unresponsive, but breathing. No memory, no chart, no page. When they checked the machines, none of them showed any logged vitals. The room was clean and empty, except for one item, a toe tag. It read, "Name, Marissa Hale. Time of death, 9:37 p.m. Date, October 12th, 2023. Note, transfer complete at 7 p.m. The emergency department at St. Anselm Regional Medical Center welcomed a new hire, Cassandra Ward, age 26, recently certified, first full-time job since graduation. She looked nervous but excited. She wore fresh scrubs, still had the creases down the sleeves. Her badge photo was 2 weeks old and already outdated. She introduced herself to the charge nurse, was handed a clipboard, assigned to overnights, bay rotations, observation first. She nodded, smiled, said, "I am ready." At 7:23 p.m., someone from administration handed her a room assignment. Start with Bay 4. Just observe. The woman from admin smiled. "You are lucky," she said. "It is a quiet room." At 7:41 p.m., Cassandra stood outside Bay 4. The door was slightly ajar. She peeked inside. No patients. Monitors off. Everything quiet. But something pulled her in a flicker. Maybe a shift in air pressure. The faint scent of something she could not quite place. Wet stone. Copper. She stepped in. The lights overhead flickered. She walked to the gurney and paused. A file sat there. No name on the tab. Just a date. October 12th, 2023. She opened it. Inside was a chart. Vitals. Trauma note. Medication logs. At the bottom, one sentence. Handwritten in red ink. She saw it. She said nothing. Cassandra blinked, looked up. The monitors switched on, one by one, all reading the same thing. Admitting. Cassandra Ward, room 4. Shift start, 7 p.m. Status, observe, witness, pending. And somewhere, just beyond the doorway, a voice whispered, "You were there too." Fade to black. End.